The Boston Bruins hit the practice ice again here on Wednesday as they prepare for a showdown tomorrow night with Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. On today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Scott McLaughlin to talk about the trade deadline, playoff opponent outlook, and so much more. So strap in and get ready for a great episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, March 8th, and I want to thank you again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app as well as on YouTube, so please do hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a thing down through the rest of the regular season and into the playoffs. If you're on Twitter, Instagram, you can find the podcast at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes, and hockey tweets at Ian C. McLaren. Now, so much has happened with the Boston Bruins over the last week or so, and I wanted to bring someone in to chat about that. So welcoming back to the podcast, Scott McLaughlin of WEEI and Escape Pod. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for taking the time to chat. Always great to catch up, catch your insights on the Boston Bruins. And I guess we'll start looking back at last week. Don Sweeney making, I guess a couple weeks ago now, he made the big move with the Capitals to acquire Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, and then also added Tyler Bertuzzi from the Detroit Red Wings. Been a few games now that we've seen the former Capitals. Any first impressions from those guys? Obviously, Orlov won first star of the week. Couldn't have gotten off to a better start, but just overall, what's your sense of Orlov and Hathaway and what they bring to the Bruins?
Yeah, I mean, Orlov obviously just made an immediate huge impact. You see that, you look at like some of the other guys they're looking at for defensemen, and it's, you kind of wonder like how much of an impact would they really make. Luke Shen, he'd be nice depth, but that's really it. Vladislav Gavrikov, he's never really been like a top guy on a playoff team, so you wonder about that. Orlov, you see why this guy played 24 minutes a game on a Stanley Cup winner with Washington in 2018. He breaks up plays defensively. He's a really good skater, passer in transition, has a good shot that, you look at his numbers and it's like, was that underutilized in Washington? Not that he's going to score as many goals as he has so far, but certainly seems like a weapon that he has. He's been involved in the offensive zone, has gotten some power play time and got moved up to the top power play unit in Wednesday's practice. So it looks like he's going to get a look there. So you see just the all around impact that he can make. And, you basically add him as like another top pairing caliber guy with McAvoy and Lindholm. And, now you have three of them, and not there aren't many teams that can say that. And Garnet Hathaway, I think, you've seen at times he's helped set the tone physically. The Rangers game kind of right off the bat, opening shift, he's getting into it with guys and, sort of getting some energy in the building. He's made some things happen on the forecheck. He had one, a couple games ago that helped set up a goal for the check line coming on right after, but he really got it started the shift before with a hard forecheck and just kind of keeping the puck down low. So you see what he can bring, to the fourth line to your bottom six. And yeah, clearly, two good additions, in Orlov in particular, a terrific addition.
Yeah, for sure. Want to mention Bertuzzi as well in a moment, but just while we're on that topic, Bruins have 8 defensemen that are healthy at the moment. Jakub Zboril has not played very much, but one mainstay from the lineup if everybody remains healthy, is going to have to come out for the playoffs. I think for tomorrow night's game, it's Connor Clifton's turn to take a seat. What do you think is kind of the optimal top six, or I guess it might be easier to say who should be the odd man out, or who is likely to be the odd man out come playoff time?
Yeah, it's tough because, obviously part of it's going to depend on health when you get there. And, if someone, not even necessarily like someone's injured to the point of not being able to play, but, someone banged up and they're only 75% and someone else is 90%.
Right.
But all things being equal, I think to me, the signs kind of point towards Grzelcyk being the odd man out. And, I think that's mainly because Orlov kind of comes in and fits in his spot and is a better all around player.
Right.
And just kind of brings more to the table. And it's, then you look around at the other guys and it's like, it's not even a knock on Grzelcyk. Like, I think Matt Grzelcyk, all things considered, is a better player than Derek Forbort or Connor Clifton.
Right.
But those guys bring something different. Forbort's obviously a huge part of the penalty kill.
Yeah.
Clifton helps set a physical tone. Carlo's been as good of a shutdown defenseman as there's been. I don't see him coming out of the lineup. And obviously Lindholm, McAvoy, Orlov are all locks. So it's Grzelcyk kind of is the one who gets left out, where it's like, okay, yeah, everyone knows he's a good puck mover, good skater, can make things happen with the puck and a stick. But what does he bring to a playoff lineup that isn't already covered in this group of defensemen? And it's kind of hard to identify that. So it seems like he would probably be the odd man out if the playoffs started today, but that can change. He's going to get looks in different spots. It looks like he's going to line up next to Derek Forbort on the third pairing on Thursday night against Edmonton. We saw him on the third pair with Connor Clifton. It's he has a chance to prove that he can play in that kind of role, which might be, a little more of a defensive role than when he's playing next to McAvoy. And if he succeeds there, maybe he battles his way in and someone else sits. But right now I would lean towards him being the seventh.
Yeah, that's probably the way it's looking. I mean, you mentioned it. Forbort, there's a reason why the Bruins are number one penalty killing team in the league. He's a big part of that. Even Clifton, he brings kind of a different element. Unfortunate for Grzelcyk, but I'm sure the opportunity will come at some point for different guys to get in the lineup. And it's a good problem to have, I guess. Before we touch on Tyler Bertuzzi and some other Bruins news and notes, a quick word about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. We've reached the midway point of the NBA season. We're well past it now, actually. And now's the perfect time to download the FanDuel Sports app. It's America's #1 sports book. And new customers can get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. All right, welcome back, Scott. And of course, the other big move that Don Sweeney made was acquiring Tyler Bertuzzi from the Detroit Red Wings. That was kind of a good news, bad news situation because we know the main reason he was able to pull that off was by creating cap space from Taylor Hall going on LTIR. First question, do we have any word yet on the seriousness of Hall and Foligno's injuries? And second to that, it's only been one game, but what do you see Bertuzzi bringing to the table so far for the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, no update on either injury yet. It seems to kind of be all quiet on the injury front there, where they sort of just left it open-ended, said, they're both longer term. We hope they're back, for the playoffs, but I think it's going to be a while before we get any sort of definitive update. They're kind of just going to leave people guessing, it seems. As far as Bertuzzi, yeah, what like a perfect player to kind of go out and target once you get the news on Hall and Foligno, where you can put him anywhere in your top 9. You can play either wing. He really seems like a perfect fit with Coyle and Frederick, which is where he played in his first game against the Rangers on Saturday.
Right.
And, I think Montgomery might move him around a little bit, but it seems like that is, a perfect place for him to settle in eventually.
Yeah.
I think what you see is, he kind of comes with this reputation as an agitator, right? Like people making the Marchand comparison. They remember when him and Marchand went at it. And it's like, well, yeah, like he can do that, but also he's a talented hockey player and a talented offensive player who makes a lot of smart plays and seems to see the ice really well. And you saw that on the goal he sets up where, it's the high lob into the zone that he knows Frederick's going to win that race to the puck because he has a step, puts it in the right spot, gets himself open behind the net, and then makes a great pass to Coyle in front. He should have had a second assist. He sets up Krejci for a wide open net, and unfortunately just kind of bounces on Krejci and ends up flipping over the net. But yeah, like you see why he had 62 points last season because he's a gifted offensive player, and his numbers were obviously down this year, and that might be part of the reason that you were able to get him for not a super prohibitive cost. But yeah, he had battled 2 broken hands. I'm sure that affected what he was doing offensively this year. And he seems to be healthy now. He says he feels good. And, if the Bruins get last year's Tyler Bertuzzi the rest of the way, then that's, that's a huge addition.
Yeah. And he's also a proven winner. Like he won an OHL championship here in Guelph where I am. I got to watch him during that run. He was incredible. And then him and Thomas Nosek were part of a Calder Cup winner in Grand Rapids as well. So hopefully that translates to the next level. Looking a bit ahead here, but with these new additions, is there any sense of whether or not the Bruins are interested in re-signing Orlov, Bertuzzi, maybe even Hathaway, or if they could even fit them under the cap next season?
Yeah, I'm sure they're interested because these are, Don Sweeney has definitely made a habit of targeting guys that fit the team and are the type of players that they would want to have around longer term. And I think all 3 of these guys fit that. But as you alluded to, the problem is they do not have a lot of cap space for next season, and they have a lot of guys that they need to sign. So, basically half their forward core is free agents or restricted free agents. So, I think they would like to, and if they're able to maybe work out some sort of discount deal with any of those guys, if they're not looking to get paid top dollar, then that's definitely a possibility. But you look at it, it's like, well, Orlov is at an age where he probably wants that one last good payday. Bertuzzi, if Bertuzzi finishes this year strong, this very well could be his biggest payday of his career.
Yeah, very true.
So it's like if those guys are going to look for top dollar, then the Bruins probably aren't the team that's going to be able to pay it unless they're moving a lot of salary out, trading guys away or whatever.
Right.
So it's going to be tough, but there will be interest there. Like I'm sure if Don Sweeney hasn't already started those conversations, he will at some point. But being interested and then actually being able to make it work financially is a whole other thing. I think Hathaway might be the most likely. He's in his 30s. He's from New England. Like I could see him maybe being 3 years, $1.2 million a year. Like sure, that works for me. I like it here. So like that I could see happening, but the bigger guys, Orlov and Bertuzzi, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a catch-22 for the Bruins. I mean, if these guys perform optimally and the Bruins win, then they're achieving their goals for this year. But they're probably those players are probably pricing themselves out from being re-signed based on what we hope will be pretty successful playoff runs. Speaking of the playoffs, Bruins obviously pretty much have home ice advantage locked up at this point. some movement down in the wild card spots. Is there any of those teams down there that give you any sort of pause that they could give the Bruins trouble, whether it be the Penguins, Islanders, who are in that spot now, or Ottawa, who's beaten them twice this year, Buffalo? Is there any reason to think that this could be a 2019 Lightning situation, or they pretty much should be able to take care of anybody, at least in that first round?
I mean, they should be able to take care of any of those wild card teams. The one that would worry me the most would be the Islanders, just because
Yeah,
I
that's what I'm
think
saying. Yep.
looking at all those teams' goalies, Ilya Sorokin is the one most likely to
Mm-hmm.
just turn into a brick wall for a series. And, Bruins could outshoot them 42-25 every game,
Mm-hmm.
and he might just catch fire and shut you down. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing there that really stands out to me. You're right. They have, Ottawa has been a pretty tough matchup for them this year. And obviously they just traded for Chikrin, so they got
Mm-hmm.
better. But I would expect the Bruins talent to win out over the course of a 7-game series when you're playing every other night versus, 3 regular season meetings that have
Right.
been spread out over months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. That looking at those teams, the Islanders are the one that stands out to me, not only because of Sorokin. Well, that's odd that I think in the 3 games that they've played the Islanders this year, they started Varlamov in all 3, which is weird. But they're also playing pretty well with Matt Barzal out of the lineup and injured. So if he comes back, we all know that narrative. But they're the one team. Yeah, I think that gives me reason to think maybe. But at the end of the day, I think they should be all right, no matter who they play, at least in the first round. It's going to be a difficult road that apart from that, anyways. Speaking of goaltending, you wrote a very interesting article today, I believe, about Boston's goaltending and how just far and away better it is than the rest of the league. What do you think is behind that this season? Linus Ullmark is just riding like an all-time heater and he's going to come back down to earth? Or is there something going on kind of behind the scenes or with his game that leads us to believe that he can sustain this at least through the playoffs? And we'll see what happens next season. But what's behind this incredible run that he's on, do you think?
I think he's just so much more comfortable in his second year in Boston. And this started right from the start. Like, he showed up to training camp and basically said that. He was like, I just feel so much better. Like, I've been here a year, family's been here a year. And it was like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, that makes sense. And then he plays so well, and you're like, all right, he wasn't lying. Like, he clearly does just feel a lot more comfortable. So, and I think he's always been talented. Like, his underlying statistics were always promising, and I think that's part of, in addition to just video and scouting, that's part of like what the Bruins saw when they targeted him in free agency is, there's more here than what showed up on a bad Buffalo Sabres team.
Yeah.
So obviously that they nailed that. And I think goalie coach Bob Essensa is, he's like the goalie whisperer. I mean, just look at the track record over the last 20 years. Like, you go from, Andrew Raycroft being rookie of the year, Tim Thomas turning his career around and winning 2 Vezinas, Tuukka Rask for a decade, and now Ullmark and Swayman. Like, it's yes, all those goalies are very talented in their own right and deserve credit for their own success, but it's also not a coincidence that they're all, at their absolute best here with Bob Essensa coaching them.
Yeah.
And Jim Montgomery, made mention of that Wednesday. He was asked about Ullmark, and he basically said, like, goalie Bob deserves a ton of credit, doesn't get enough.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's, like you said, he's been the constant through that whole. Bruins fans have been so spoiled with goaltending over the last 20 years or so. And as much as people liked to dump on Rask or kind of were questioning that signing last year, there's no better proof than the numbers, and they don't lie this season for sure for Ullmark and Swayman, who's come on after a bit of a difficult start. Bruins preparing for a game tomorrow night against the Oilers, who they played last week. McDavid with 2 goals, but they were able to come out with the win. We've seen this week David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron sitting out of practice for some load management. I think Montgomery called it like a senior's discount or benefit or something like that. Do you think that's going to trickle into game situations here down the stretch where some of these guys will get a night off? Maybe we'll see a call up or two to fill out the roster. I think the last couple of years, they've really filled out the roster, especially on the final game of the regular season. But is that something we can anticipate? You think Bergeron getting a night off, Krejci, maybe even Pasta or some of the heavy hitters on defense?
Yeah, definitely. I think you'll definitely see some of those guys get games off down the stretch. Jim Montgomery said it might not start this weekend only because they've had these 4 days off between games. So even though it is a 3 and 4 in a back-to-back situation, guys should be okay for this weekend. But yeah, as you know, they have back-to-backs the next 5 weekends. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities in there to get Bergeron a game or 2 off, Krejci a game or 2 off, maybe even, Pastrnak, Marchand. Montgomery did say, I think earlier this week, that at some point the defense rotation will include games off for McAvoy, Lindholm, and Orlov. So, I think it might only be 1 or 2 games for all those guys between now and game 1. But, anything to just save them, whether it's the second game of back-to-back, maybe it saves them travel somewhere, hopping on a plane. Like, it all helps. It's all an opportunity to, 1, to get those guys rest, to make sure they're not overworked, and 2, then to try out some different things. They've had, especially before the trades, like a pretty set lineup for a long stretch. And why would you touch it? It was working so well. But you do want to at least have a look at some other options before, potentially, God forbid, like an emergency situation in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. And I think off mic, you were mentioning Brad Marchand specifically, kind of mentioned his recovery from hip surgery. I know when he was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, he said he might have come back a bit too early, or not that he wasn't healthy, but just missing training camp. It's difficult to get back to full speed in a regular season situation. Just let us know what he said today about that. Was there anything new with respect to his recovery there?
Yeah, I'd say not really new, but he did just reiterate that, he's still not really where he expected to be, and that it's still kind of been, it's been a process that's required patience. He was asked, well, yeah, you're still putting up, a point per game.
Yeah.
Is that at least some solace? And he was like, sort of, but it's not even really about the points for him. It's about how he feels out there. He said, he's used to feeling, I think the word he used was like in control of the play when he's on the ice. He in his best years felt like he was in control, like he could do almost whatever he wanted. And he just said, this year it hasn't quite felt like that. He hasn't always felt like he's been completely in control. So he's felt like he's, been fighting it a little bit. So, obviously we're talking about kind of like the highest standards you can have here, where, to hear a player who's averaging a point per game talk about being disappointed and, this isn't where he wants to be and all that, like, he's still been really good. Obviously he's not, very, very far from hurting the team or anything like that. But when your standard is, 90 to 100 points a season, and, you're only on like 80-point pace, like that's a drop off. So, I think he's fine. I think he'll be solid the rest of the way. Like, I wouldn't be too worried about it, but he knows he has another gear that he still hasn't quite gotten to. And I guess, the scary thing if you're an opponent is there's still time for him to get there before the playoffs start. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's crazy to think that he has another level to hit, and hopefully, he does hit it just in time for the playoffs. Big game tomorrow night against the Oilers. Really excited about that one. Thank you, Scott, for joining me again here today. And just remind people where they can find your stuff on the Bruins and where they can find you on Twitter.
Sure. Yeah. You can get all my stuff on weei.com. Follow the Skate Podcast wherever you get podcasts. And on Twitter, I'm at smclaughlin9.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much again, Scott. And maybe we'll catch up again before the playoffs or during the playoffs and get your thoughts on what we hope will be a pretty long run here for the Boston Bruins. So thanks so much again, and take care.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Ian.
Yeah, no problem. All right. That is it for another episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Thanks again to Scott for jumping on and chatting. Always great to catch up and get some insights, boots on the ground. And tomorrow we will preview the game against the Edmonton Oilers, do a cup check, and bring you all the latest on the black and gold here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Take care, friends.